Hello, my friends, and welcome to Lord's Day Live. Thank you for being with me. If you are watching this live, it's Mother's Day. And so I want to say thank you to all the mothers around the world. Happy Mother's Day. If you're not watching this live, it's just another day. And you need to know that this was recorded on Mother's Day, and that's why I just said that. Excuse me. Basic Bible. Yeah, it's great for homeschool and Sunday school curriculum. It's great for family devotionals and all kinds of stuff. And I'm so thankful that you support us so that we can make this happen. Let's get after this. You ready? Got a good chapter for you today. You're going to like this. Segment number uno, do the doodle. Say the doodler. All right, do the doodle. And I, just moments ago, I grabbed my doodleator and I said, Sonny, you need to clean your doodleator. And so I cleaned my doodleator because it had other stuff on it. But now it's clean. Now I got my thing. Now I'm ready to go. How about you? Well, let's review that we are talking about, right now we're at Abraham and Sarai, if I'm not mistaken. But we're dealing with generally Genesis. They didn't seem to get their names changed at the same time. But anyhow, Abraham and Sarai and generally Genesis, that's the theme of our time together, and it's time to doodleate. So, by way of review, here's what we've covered so far. Two big chapters, actually just one chapter. But the first chapter was chapter 17. It's a difficult one to remember, but it's the best thing I could come up with at the present. Thank you, Gabriel, for drawing that. Remember, this is the covenant of circumcision. This is where God commands that the covenant between him and Abraham and his family is going to be sealed by a cutting off of the flesh. And so every male child, every male within the camp, within the family, if they wanted to be acceptable, they had to go through this surgical procedure. All right, in chapter 18, we're going to deal with Abraham, who's going to get 3 visitors. Again, a rather complicated clue, but I appreciate the way Gabriel did this, and I think you're going to be able to see how this is going to play out. All right, first of all, you got to do one dude, and remember, we're not very good at dudes, so we'll just go like this. Okay, just give yourself... Okay, and then in the background, just go ahead and make him stick figures, all right? In the background, you got these 2 other people, all right? And they're going to come, and then the 8 is over here. Oh, I should have reminded you how to make the 8, but anyhow, that's a pretty pitiful 8. Look at that. Maybe we should have done the 8 correctly. All right, let's do the 8 correctly. All right, remember you go 8, and then you just make it big. You outline it like this, and then you take out the middle sections. See how I did that? Are you watching me? All right, so you got the 8. This is the 1, and that is the 8. Now, inside here, Gabriel has got a tent inside in the 2. He's got a tent and a guy. All right, and I think that's to remind us that this is Abraham's tent, and 3 fellas are coming, or 3 people are coming to visit. All right, there's my buddy Rajesh. I think he's in Sweden. I'm not sure where Rajesh is right now. Rajesh travels quite a bit, but I picked him up years ago. Rajesh, love you. Hug your wife for me. Happy Mother's Day. Rajesh is not a mother, but anyhow, well, here's 18. I know it's not exactly the best 18 I've ever done in my life, but you get the picture, right? That's another one of those complicated ones for us to draw. All right, that's 18. So, chapter 17, we're going to have the covenant of the circumcision. And then in chapter 18, we're going to have Abraham's 3 visitors. So, 3 people are going to come, and they're going to visit Abraham. And one of those is going to be the Lord. We'll talk about that in our expanded time together here in just a minute. Segment number 1, test prep. What is the theme of Genesis chapter 18? Remember? Do you need to go back? Abraham has 3 visitors. All right. Now, we'll talk again. You might want a little bit more expressiveness. Your parents may want you to give a little more information than that, but essentially what's going to happen is Abraham's going to have 3 visitors, okay? And they're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Specifically, he's going to talk with the Lord about it, Sodom and the condition of Sodom, etc. But what I just need you to remember is that Abraham has 3 visitors come to his tent. Okay? If you can remember that, then you'll be well down the path to understanding what you need to. All right, Sillyville. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A bear that has no teeth. I think I've used this one before, but I brought it back out of the mothball because I thought it was hilarious. What do you call a bear with no teeth? Clearly, you call him a gummy bear because he's got no teeth. He has to gum it. You know, he doesn't have any teeth, so he gums it. He's a gummy bear. Do you get it? You don't get it? Why don't you get it? I think it's funny. That's why I brought it back. Oh well. All right, moving on. Segment number 2. As we move into the memory section, we're going to use this part of the El Braino, and we're going to try to make a memory and try to make it stick in our brains. Now, those of us who are old, sometimes it doesn't stick as well, so you got to work at it. Here's your memory verse for today. Genesis 18:22. So the men turned from there, they went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. All you got to do, honey, all you got to do is say each line 5 times. That's what Abraham's saying to Sarai there. So the men, so the men, so the men, so the men, so the men. I think I got the first line in my head, so the men. I could probably do the second line then. Turn from there, turn from there, turn from there, turn from there, turn from there. Look at that. So the men turned from there. I'm halfway there. Well, maybe not halfway, but I'm getting pretty close. You guys could do this. I think you can. And again, if you have trouble doing it that way, you can always go and you can eliminate key words, post it all over the house. Every time you go by, you got to say the word or the words. And if you can't say it, then you can't continue on. And then I'll tell you when it really gets bad, if it's an emergency and I got to get to the bathroom. Oh, but I passed that sticky note and there's those I got to say, oh, I can't get the last one. What am I going to do? You see what I'm saying? So you need to get the memory verse in your head. Oh, my. All right. If we're going to test over segment number 2, we're going to ask these 2 questions. Besides the men who also came to Abraham. Now, I've already said it about 3 times, so you should have this one in your head already. If you don't know what it is, look it up. Besides the men, that's what it refers to them as men in this story. Probably talking about angels, but that's a whole different discussion as to why he refers to them as men. But anyhow, besides the men, who else came to visit Abraham? And can you quote the memory verse? Well, I bet you can quote the first 2 lines. Remember, get it in your head, because if you got to go to the bathroom and you can't fill in the blanks, what are you going to do? Here's another silly. What do you call a pig who uses karate? Both my boys grew up and had a good friend who taught my oldest son karate, and then took my youngest son to another, what do you call them, dojo? I don't know what you call those places, but anyhow, both of them learned karate. But anyhow, neither of them are pigs. Well, when they're at the supper table, maybe. What do you call a pig who uses karate? A pig that uses it. Well, clearly, she thinks it's funny. Mom hasn't even answered the question. And so she thinks it's funny, but she thinks the question's funny. Mom is going to think the response is funny. It's just a funny slide. What do you call a pig who uses karate? You call him a pork chop. You get it? You get the... You call a pig who uses karate pork chop. Oh, I got to do the nose. Come on, people, loosen up. That was funny. Now I got my nose all weird. I'll stop doing that. Segment number trace. That would be 3 for those of us who speak English. I love my little dude down here. I just think that was one of the best additions that I have ever done to our slides. Do you not agree? And let's go back. He just kind of falls onto the scene. Let's just watch him. Are you ready to meditate with me? Watch this. Here it comes. Here it comes. Right here. Isn't that the best? He says. You see, he's sitting by the pond. See? He's sitting by the pond so that he can ponder. You get it? You get it? Oh, there's my buddy Dennis. He's watching from Kenya. So we got him from Sweden. We got him from Kenya. Who else wants to chime in there? Dennis, good to see you. Say hello to my buddy Rajesh. Rajesh, say hello to my buddy Dennis. Good to see you guys. International people. Anyhow, we're going to ponder a passage here. This guy here, he's already pondering it. He's doing the fishing thing, but he's sitting by the pond and he's pondering. Well, let's ponder a passage. That means we're going to think deeply about this particular ponderation. Oh dear, folks, I did a bad thing. Notice I did not change our clue over here. That can't be good. We got to stop that. So, Sonny, what you do is you try not to distract the people, and you just go ahead and you go 18. I can't believe I did that. Well, yeah, I can because I do it all the time. But anyhow, we're in 18, not 17. Can you guys even remember the clue for 18? Well, sure you can because we already drew it, right? That's kind of sloppy, but anyhow. Here's Genesis chapter 18. So the men turned from there and they went toward where? That's going to be on your test. They went toward Sodom. Now, do we know anything about Sodom? Yes, we do. Now, not stuff that we haven't covered yet. What do you know about Sodom? That's where Lot lives. Very good. All right, so these men, they turned from there. They turned from where? They turned from visiting Abraham. And they're going to go on down towards Sodom. But Abraham still stood before the Lord. So the Lord's going to wait. You're going to hang back. And Abraham and the Lord are going to have a conversation. Okay. Then Abraham drew near and he said, speaking to the Lord, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Abraham's really concerned about the justice of God here. Now, honestly, given what we know about Abraham and the fact that he rescued Lot from the bad kings and the blessing that he gave to Lot with regards to giving him first choice over the best land, etc., Abraham's got a big place in his heart for Lot. Even though he's his nephew, I think maybe, I know that he treats him as family, maybe as a son, something like that, but he's got a big place in his heart for Lot. And so, knowing that Lot lives down there, and knowing that God has come to inspect the city, and knowing that the city is horrible, wicked, Abraham's concerned. And so he says to the Lord, he says, you're not going to sweep away the righteous along with the wicked, are you? Won't you give them an opportunity to escape? Which, of course, God does. We know that from the future story. But that's his concern. Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city, Abraham says. Lord, will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for 50 righteous people? And so he begins the count with 50. He says, Lord, if there's 50 folks who are righteous, won't you save the city for 50 folks? And so remember that, because that's going to be on your test. 50, that's the first place he goes. Who are in the, far be it from you to do such a thing to put righteous to death and the wicked so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it that you shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And so Abraham, pleading with the Lord, he says, we know you're fair. We know that you're the God who judges the world. Will you please be just? Now, I believe it's in your question that you're going to have to answer. What is just and why is it important to us? Justice largely means to be fair. It means that when somebody does something wrong, they pay the price for that. But if somebody else does the same thing, they equally pay the price for it. So we're working on equal ground. Justice can work the other way as well. If somebody does what is right and they are paid extra money, and somebody comes along and does the same thing as the first person, they get paid extra money. That's just. It's fair. Okay? And so Abraham is saying to God, but if you go down there and you find out that there's a lot of wicked people, which Abraham, I'm sure, knew there was, but there's a few. You're not going to punish all the few just because the wicked are there too. Won't you allow them to escape or something? And he asks with regards to his justice. God, we know you're a just God, and so please be just. Then if you skip all the way down to verse 32, you'll notice that they go through some talking back and forth about various numbers. But in verse 32, we have the last plea that Abraham makes. Then Abraham said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but just one time. I one more request. Suppose 10 are found there, he answered. For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it, God says. And so we start at 50. Where is that? Start up here at 50. And they begin to talk back and forth, and they keep reducing the number, and Abraham says, okay, I just one more. God, if you can find 10 folks, will you spare those 10 folks and not destroy the city because of those 10 folks? God says, if you can find me 10, or if I can find 10, then I won't destroy it. Now, we know that God destroyed the city, so what does that tell you? He couldn't find 10. In fact, there's only 4 that are actually going to escape, right? There's going to be Lot, Mrs. Lot, and his 2 daughters. Their 2 daughters, right? Mrs. Lot doesn't make it very far, does she? She's told not to turn around and look back, but she does, and she turns into a pillar of salt. So really, if you want to think about this tragic day, it's only 3 people that survive. And so, no, couldn't even find 10 in the city. All right, but here are your questions that you're going to have with regards to that, okay? So that's kind of the expanded version of Genesis chapter 18. As far as expanded, that's not probably the best word because it's kind of a concise. We took the core out of chapter 18, and that's what we talked about. All right, that being said, there are the questions for your upcoming test. All right, I think I can take this down now. Oh, me and my goof ups. Oh, my. I'm telling you, if I didn't have my little wife to make sure I made things right, I don't know what I'd do. I just don't. Did you get them? All right. There's your 10 questions. Moving on. Oh, this is great. I love this guy's face so much. He's got to be a comedian. What animal needs to wear a wig? I can't say I ever thought this through and did a lot of meditating on this particular topic, but I suppose there are some animals out there. My daughter-in-law knows that I have chickens, and her son, my grandson, he comes and helps me feed them and take care of them and such things. She sent me a silly little thing the other day. They actually make helmets for chickens. I don't know what the helmet's for, but it had these real live chickens, and they had this little tiny helmet strapped under the, I don't know what in the world. But this guy, he's asking about wigs. What animal needs to wear a wig? Can you get this one? It's almost a little bit of a puzzle. I should put this off to later, giving you more time to think about it. You guys can get this one. What animal needs a wig? A bald eagle. Did you get that? Did you get it? Yeah, way to go. Air fist pump thing. Way to go. A bald eagle needs a wig because he's bald. Well, maybe not literally bald, but better than putting a helmet on him, Victoria. That's my daughter-in-law. I love her so much. Oh, she sends me all kinds of silly stuff. All right, here's segment number 4, and we're going to apply the why as a little question mark. Going doing, 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 doing. Anyhow, apply the why. This is where we ask ourselves, why do we even need to study chapter 18 of the book of Genesis? Well, I'm fixing to tell you, so sit up straight and you're going to figure it out. Here we go. All right. Isn't that a pretty background? Oh, well. And then here we go. All right, there it is. Genesis chapter 18. I drew in on, there's a lot of stuff there, but I drew in on this phrase here. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? Abraham is pleading with God, and he's saying, God, we know that you judge the earth. You are the creator. You're supreme. We understand that. And we're asking, won't you please be just? I suppose if you think about it, he could be saying, God, you don't have to be because you're God and you can do whatever you want. But on the other hand, God is just as part of his character. And if he didn't obey his character, if he didn't do what his character, would he be God at all? And so Abraham plays on that side of things and he says, Lord, please be just. Here's my questions. What does it even mean to be just? Now, I defined that just a moment ago, and so I hope that you were listening. But what does it even mean to be just? Can you give an example of justice? Maybe let's do it just within your own home, okay? You don't have to go to a court or have a judge or anything like that. Just, go to your own home. What in your home is just? It's right. It's fair. But here's the question you're going to have to answer for the test, and that is, why is justice so important to our lives? Now, you probably can't answer that one unless you answer these two, because if you don't even know what just means, how are you going to answer that? But once you've answered it, for instance, in your own home, if things were not just, if there wasn't justice, would it be fair? How would you feel about that? Would you want to live in that home if there wasn't any justice? So that's your question. What does it mean to be just, and why is that so important to us in our lives? Let's be silly again. Oh, no, not yet. Test prep. Segment 4. Why is justice so important to our lives? Didn't I say that was going to be? I already told you that. But I guess we didn't do the screen. You got to have the screen because that way you can see it on the screen whenever I say it. Here's your question. Why is justice so important to our lives? That's your question. Now we'll be silly. I think this is our last silly. Fixing to bring up my hairball friend. Love this guy. Got really bad hair problems, but I love this guy. Now, he doesn't think so much of me. You're going to see that in a moment. But I like him. I think he's a fine fellow. Open the blinds to the window, and there he is, peeking in at us. My hairball friend. It looks like he spent a lot of time with the hairdryer, but he didn't spend any time with the comb or the brush. You need to do something about that, buddy. What do you call an alligator in a vest? Now, I know what you're saying. You've done this one before, too. This is 2 that I brought out of the mothballs. And it's not because I got a shortage of jokes. It's just because I like these 2. And this one I think is especially good. Now, if you think about it, you probably won't get this one. Unless you paid attention in the distant past. This is a good one, though. What do you call an alligator in a vest? Well, clearly you would call him an investigator. Because he got a vest. I wish I could have found a picture of an alligator with a vest on and have him dance across the screen, because you would have busted up. You would have started laughing, falling on the floor. I know you would have. Yes, you would have. You certainly would have. My furball friend, he says, you're the wrong kind of a nut. I told you, he just doesn't really like me, but go ahead and get a screenshot of us. We're cute together, aren't we? You really need to work on your hair, you hairbally. All right. That brings us into segment number 5. Oh, there's my buddy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. It's time to test. He loves this part. You love this part. We love this part. It's glad to be together for this part, aren't we? Here they are. For your final test, Chapter 18, the book is Genesis. There are the questions. And don't forget the cartoon figure of me says he believes in you. And I'll give you one better. Not only does he believe in you, I believe in you. Yes, I do. Hey, did you ever look at us? We do look pretty similar. Gabriel did a pretty good job. Here, I'll do this. This way. Do we look up? Do we look? Yeah, I know. All right, I get my head out the way now. There you go. There are your 10 questions, folks. Can you do it? I believe in you, so I think you can. Love the roller coaster. Well, that was fun. Seeing this kid here, he cracks me up. I wish you could see this one here. She's scared to death. She's terrified. I got her all covered up. Maybe in the future I'll bring her out. These people here, they're kind of enjoying it too. But this guy here, he just, whoa, come on, this is great. And mom here, oh, she just loves it. Her daughter is about to die, but she's just loving it. Anyhow, if you found that this study was at all beneficial to you, would you consider praying for Cindy and I? Probably more Cindy than I. And would you think about supporting us in our ministry so that we can continue to make this happen for young people around the world and old people around the world? I got my buddy Rajesh watching in Sweden and my buddy Dennis watching in Kenya, and they're not young people. They're like old, not old people, but they're wonderful guys. But they're watching. And Dennis is part of the School of Biblical Studies, and so he'll have to go through this particular part, and he'll have to answer all those questions to be part of the School of Biblical Studies. And so even adults are doing this. Thank you for your support. Please continue to pray for us. I love you, by the way. Be there. Matthew 16:26. It's time to pray. And so, as we do, if you will, go ahead and make your comments there. As I've already mentioned, we've got folks literally around the world. Sweden, Kenya, my mom who's next door in Arkansas, United States. And I'm sure there is more. We got folks all over the place who watch this. And so now's the time. If you want to have your prayer request mentioned, and we'll take it around the world with all the folks who are there to pray with us, go ahead and put it in the comment section right now. Here's a few that I've got. Title 42, Exploration, the Border Surge. We have got a real problem down south, and we've got folks that are coming in illegally. I need you to understand that I really do sympathize with folks such as that. And I understand the advantages that I have. Probably not as vividly appreciative of them as I should be, being that I grew up pretty much spoiled by living here in America. But I do appreciate the fact that we've got moms and dads and others who want to get into America and have an opportunity to have the freedoms that I have enjoyed all of my life. I get that, I appreciate that, and I don't begrudge that for one moment. However, there is a system, or there was a system in place, and we need to go through that system. And I am really, really concerned that we aren't doing that. I know we're not doing that, and that our present president is not doing what he needs to just to protect those borders, because we've got folks that are carrying drugs in. We've got folks that are coming in who are illegal, not just in the sense in the way that they're entering the country, but we got immigrants who have come in here and they've done horrible things to citizens of the United States, etc. So as Title 42 expires, as we got this chaos at the border and we got a president who doesn't seem to know what he's doing, would you pray that God would allow two things? Number one, that there be order at the border. And number two, that those individuals who are truly sincere and struggling to get in here will have an opportunity to have the blessings that I have enjoyed all of my life. My mother reminds me of a little boy I'm aware of who has been diagnosed with leukemia. And tragic situation. I'm in prayer about it, and I wish that you would be in prayer. I'm not going to mention names, but please be in prayer for this little guy. Gabriel's summer and fall. It's about to get started, and the summer, that is. And if you would be remembering him, two potentials on the horizon: one, to work as an intern at a church plant in Memphis, and two, to go to Colombia on a 3-week mission trip. Would you please be in prayer for Gabriel that he will be able to do both those things if God wants him to, but that more than that, that it will be an exciting, uplifting, growing time for both him and those that he serves. My little wife continues to have a lot on top of her, and it's Mother's Day today, and of course she's the mother of two, and I'm so thankful for her and all that she has done to take care of them. I'm thankful for my mom also. Happy Mother's Day, Mother. And just be mindful of my wife, if you will, and all the mothers of the world. But Cindy's got a lot on her, and I love her very, very much. She chimes in just now, and she says, would you remember Haiti? Yes, thank you, honey. In fact, I think I've got it down here in just a second. All the mothers of the world, I already covered that. All right. My upcoming class. I'm going to go ahead and mention Haiti because I'm not sure I did put it in, Cindy. I thought I did. A lot of violence in Haiti. Cindy and I support a little girl in Haiti, and it's just a really, really horrible, gang-ridden, dominated culture right now, and a lot of violence, theft, etc., and very little peace. Please be mindful of the folks in Haiti, especially God's people in Haiti. My upcoming class. I should have worded that differently because it's not upcoming anymore. We've already done the first lesson. But on last Wednesday, we had our first lesson on Catholicism and the Antichrist. Had over 1,000 views in just 3 days. A lot of interest in this particular class. Had a lot of comments that have been made. Most of them, I can say, were nasty, hurtful kind of comments. But it is what it is. Be in prayer that I will not only say what is truth, but that I will be self-disciplined in the way that I deal with some of the individuals who are responding in a very unkind manner. Would you please? And you can join me, by the way, for that particular class. Happens every Wednesday night, 7 o'clock live. Or you can sign up at sunnychilds.com. You can sign up and be part of the Restoration School of Biblical Studies. All it requires is an email. There is no fees or anything like that. It's really self-testing as well. And sign up there, and you'll receive every Friday, you'll receive a group. Well, it's an email that has a group of links to all the classes that I've done that week, one of which is this one. All right? Be in prayer for that one, please. I think it's very, very important in the times that we live. My computer continues to give me all kinds of nutso problems. My parents-in-law, they celebrated their 66th anniversary yesterday. So happy anniversary to Maxine and Carlton, and you are loved, and we're thankful that you live with us and that we were able to share the house and that we can do things together. And happy anniversary to y'all. And then lastly, the home church worship guides, which we continue to send out, and we continue to post online so that you can have them. Here, let me blow that up for you. So you can go ahead and screenshot that, and you can use that for today if you wanted to. We're in Acts chapter 17. You see on the left That's the Sunday home church. You can use that as a sample schedule. It's patterned after what Paul talks to the Corinthian church about doing. The memory passage is chapter 17 and verse 23, as you see there. Here's the memory clue. Then you move Monday through Saturday, and you have daily devotionals that you can have on that same topic. And by the end of the week, you ought to be pretty well familiar with Acts chapter 17. So there you go. Hope you were able to screenshot that. Happy Mother's Day to those of you who are mothers. Welcome to Lord's Day Live in our sermon segment. Before we get started, I need to get something to drink. Good stuff. All right, are you ready? We continue to be talking about, let's see if I do that right. We continue to be talking about Genesis, and we're trying to apply it. We're into chapter 18, interesting chapter, as we're overlooking the city of Sodom. We're not going to get Sodom destroyed in this particular chapter, but we're going to look into it. And in chapter 18, we're going to make some applications, which I think are really interesting with regards to Calvinism. You're going to see some play over here. I know. You went all the way to the Genesis to get a discussion of Calvin? Yeah. Even in Genesis, we find a lot of information that offsets the false doctrines of Calvinism. Anyhow, here's your 5 questions with regards to what's going to take place in this particular chapter. Got them? All right, let's move into it. In Genesis chapter 18, we're going to ask this question. Will God act outside his nature? In Genesis 18, 25 and 26, Abraham says to God, "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" And the Lord said, "If I find in Sodom or at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake." You're familiar with this particular passage, but it's where Abraham works from 50 all the way down to 10. Just constantly keeps going back to God, and he says, "God, but if you find this, if you find that." I'm convinced that one of the reasons he's so concerned about Sodom is because that's where his nephew lives, Lot. And he realizes what's going to take place with regards to that. And we know the end of the story, that Lot will eventually be rescued. It's not a very good rescue. It's a good rescue from the standpoint of what God did. It's not a good rescue from the standpoint of what Lot and his wife and his kids do. But anyhow, you know what's going to take place. However, before that happens, Abraham and the Lord are going to have a pretty frank discussion. In fact, as you get to I think it's verse 32, you move on down the context, Abraham's almost apologetic when he says, "Lord, can I just ask one more time?" And he says, "How about 10, if you find 10? And we know that he doesn't even find 10. There's actually 4 who escape the city, and only 3 of them make it to the caves because Mama gets turned into a pillar of salt. So really you could say you only find 4 righteous people that escape, and one of those wasn't all that righteous. But anyhow, what we find in this passage is Abraham asking of God, "Will you be just?" I have a friend who I used to interact with quite regularly online, but he got so ridiculous in what he does that I pushed him aside. I just don't have time for it anymore. But he made a statement some months ago with regards to God. And he's got this crazy perspective that it's pretty much a perspective of chaos. But he's got this perspective that God can just do whatever he wants. In other words, God is God, and so God can do whatever he wants. In fact, he would go so far as to accuse God of doing evil, because to God it's not even evil, because God's God and God can do whatever he wants. And he made this statement: God is ex lex. That means that he's above the law or without the law. He's supreme, and so he doesn't even have law. So I guess he's a God of chaos. But anyhow, God is ex lex and can do whatever he wants because he is above the law, outside the law. And he would use Romans chapter 9. Let me come over here. He would use Romans chapter 9 to make that particular point. He would say, "Has the potter," that's referring to God, "has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath, to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction?" And so my friend JC, he would say, see there, God makes stuff prepared. So God designs some stuff to go to hell, prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory. And so he would use Romans chapter 9 to suggest that God makes some of us to go to hell. We don't even have a choice in the matter. You were designed to be hell-bound. And then he makes some of us who are designed to be glory-bound. And there's nothing you can do about it. That's why Calvinists believe in evil babies. They believe that because of what takes place or took place in the life of Adam and Eve, that babies then inherit the original sin. Read Exodus chapter 18, not Exodus, excuse me, Ezekiel 18, and you'll find that that's just simply not the case. But that's what they believe. And by the way, maybe even the majority of Christendom believes the same, even when you take in Catholicism. The majority of those who call themselves Christians believe in original sin, that babies are evil. Think about that. I'm convinced, on the other hand, that God does not make us evil because, as he will say or David will say of him, that God knit him together in his mother's womb. If you say babies are evil, you got to ask yourself this question. At what point in the knitting process does God insert evil? You see, my friend JC, he wouldn't have any trouble making that conclusion because God is ex-lex. He's above law, and therefore he can do evil if he wants to because he's not influenced by the laws of men. That's what I want to challenge this morning in our lesson. And so let's go there. Here's the stuff that I just showed you on the screen. But now I want to begin showing you some things about how God actually does, if you will, prepare for destruction, prepare for glory. How does he actually make the decisions with regards to that? Does he just kind of up there in heaven rolling dice and say, oh, I like Sonny, he goes to heaven. Oh, I don't like that person, they're going to hell? How does he make these decisions? Romans chapter 8, notice that's just right before Romans chapter 9. So God has already given us the solution to the problem before he introduces this interesting passage that JC would pervert and use for his own purposes. In Romans chapter 8, he says this, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. So the way he predestines or prepares beforehand, that's predestined, preparing before. The way he predestines has something to do with what he foreknows. Well, what does that word mean? The reason this passage is here is because I want you to see that the same word, same Greek word is used later on. So if we can be good Bible students and let God interpret himself, let the Bible interpret the Bible, then we can understand how this term is used in this context, and it's going to reflect upon how this term is used in this context. Because Calvinists will say foreknew means that God loved them ahead of time. They'll say Adam knew his wife Eve. God knew us intimately, if you will, prior to, and therefore the ones he loved, he decided you get glory. The ones he hated, he decided you're going to get damnation. That's the conclusion that they would draw. However, if you really do a word study, you'll find that later on in Scripture, Peter is actually going to reference the same word, and he's going to say this, you therefore, beloved, knowing this beforehand. That's how it's translated. The caps here, that's how it's translated, but it's the same Greek word, okay? So translators put these English words here and that English word there, thinking that it would better describe, but it's the same Greek word, okay? Knowing beforehand, take care that you are not carried away with the air of life. So in this particular context, we find that they're defining it as knowing beforehand. In this particular context, we're defining it as foreknew. Sounds like the same thing, doesn't it? Yeah, it does, because that's what it means. To know something ahead of time. Now, let's take that and let's consider some applications with regards to that. If God is outside of law, but he knows things ahead of time, how then does he prepare those folks who are prepared for destruction and prepare those folks who are prepared for glory? How does he do that? He does it based upon, if you can trust Scripture, and I do, he does it based upon what he foreknows, or what is known beforehand. Stay with me. Now I want to take you to John chapter 1, verse 14, because this, I think, wraps it all together. In John 1 14 through 15, it says this, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory as of the only Son, from the Father, full of grace and truth. Then verse 14 says, John bore witness about him. There are three things that we find in John chapter 1 that are very, very significant to this idea that God can just do what he wants. Okay? that God's outside of law, and so he can just do whatever he desires. Is that true? Or is it true that God, being a God that has a nature and has described his nature and tells us he doesn't lie, does he have to stay within his own nature? Three applications to be made from John chapter 1. Number one, Jesus is the communication of divinity. Notice it says, and the Word became flesh. If you go back to verse 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. So whatever is happening in verse 14 is talking about what was God or is God. Okay? So God becomes flesh. This is the Emmanuel, God with us. This is when Jesus comes and he's part of our context. So Jesus, it's interesting that John would use the word because that means Jesus is the communication of divinity. Jesus came for the purpose of describing God to us. He came for the purpose of helping us understand who God is. We talk about a touchstone or an illustration, an example. Jesus was that to us. Jesus came, he lived among us. For 33 years, he struggled under the same pressures that you and I struggle. He had the same temptations that you and I have. He had the fleshly context in which he existed, etc. And because of that, Jesus then becomes the perfect communication of divinity to us. What would it look like if God came and inserted himself into our context fully? It looked like Jesus. So Jesus has become the ultimate communication of divinity. Hold on to that point. I'm drawing to a conclusion with this idea of God as excellence. And we have seen he became flesh and he dwelt among us. The second thing that's important is that not just that he's the communication of divinity, it's that he came and he was part of our context in communicating divinity. There are those who stand far off and they lecture us on what it's like, or they tell us keys and principles from a lofty pulpit. And we are supposed to, as subservient folks sitting in pews facing the back of the head of the fellow in front of us, we're just supposed to accept it. But that's not what Jesus did. Jesus didn't just say, I am coming to explain God to you. He came and lived out what he explained. He became the living example. That's why it's so important, and many of our elders don't do this, but that's why it's so important for our elders to be living examples of the principles of God. Not just meeting in closed doors like some kind of board of directors making decisions for the church, but actually living out the principles in front of us. That's why Catholicism is so perverted when they demand of their bishops that they not even be married. Because God himself in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1 tell us that bishops have to be married so that they then can be proven to take care of the household of God. They've got to live it. They've got to be living examples. And then, by being living examples, they then show God in the present situation. So if you've got elders who are unqualified, because, let's just go with one, they're supposed to be hospitable. When's the last time you were in one of your elders' homes? All of your elders' homes, for that matter. I know some elders that never. They got a wife who doesn't want company like that, so they never bring. They're not qualified. I need to see how you live. I need to be able to come into your context. Now come back to our point. Jesus defines our responsibility to be the image of God within the human context. He dwelt among us, and by so doing, he becomes the definition of what it's like for God to live in the world. Now, if you and I are created in his image, then Jesus is the definition of what you and I must do to show God in the world, just like Jesus showed God in the world. We become his representatives. We are the light on the hill. You don't hide under the bushel. We are those who are supposed to show the divine image within the human context. That is our responsibility. Now, this is where we draw the conclusion then. So, if Jesus is the communication of divinity, and he defines the responsibility that we have to also be the communication of divinity, we must have a consistent example of divinity in order to do that successfully. If God's all over the map, If God truly is ex lex, and that is, he can do whatever he wants, that he doesn't have to conform to his image, that there is nothing consistent about him, that he lied when he said that I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. If that's God, then we got chaos. And we don't have an example. You and I have no parameters. We have nothing to base our lifestyle on. And it leads us to this. God's not a God of chaos or uncertainty, as the Calvinist J.C. would say, but rather he is a God of order and he is a God of certainty. You can know exactly what God wants of you because God himself has lived it out and is consistent. He doesn't change the rules. Now let's go back to our original passage. So as God is determining what to do with Sodom, and as Abraham is intervening on behalf of Sodom, and he's saying, Lord, please, if you find 50, will you say, yeah, if I find 50? And he dickers all the way down to 10. And even at 10, God says, yes, if I can find 10 righteous people, I will not destroy them. He doesn't find 10. He does destroy them. We know the end of the story. But Abraham, before that happens, makes a very, very important point about God. And 2 points, actually. Number one, he's the judge of the earth. The ultimate, he made us, so he ought to be able to judge us. But number two, being the judge of the earth, he is going to be just because that's his nature. Imagine what it would be like if we served a God who did not exemplify the things that he wants or demands of you and I. We'd have no idea, no pattern. It really smacks at, Calvinism does this, my buddy JC does this, it really smacks at the perverted, very modern view that there is no absolute truth. That's what Calvinism ultimately brings us to. There is no absolute truth because God is ex-lex. He's above it all. He doesn't have to conform. And so there is no pattern. There is no absolute truth. You can't trust it. If God does not provide us an immovable truth that is forever going to stand, if he doesn't provide us that, then you and I have no hope. We have no way of knowing what we're supposed to be doing down here. But if he does, by communicating to us, while living among us, what our responsibility is, then you see we got something to hold on to. Now, I failed to mention verse 15 when I got to number 3, and I should have, forgive me. Notice that John bore witness about him. This is our responsibility as well. We are to bear witness about who God is. But imagine trying to bear witness about who God is if you don't know who God is, because God won't stand still long enough to define himself. He's just all over the place. He has nothing consistent about him. And so how could I share that with my neighbor? How could I possibly tell my neighbor who God is if God's going to change tomorrow? And he's not the same God that I'm talking about today. You see the problem Calvinism has here? God does conform to his own nature because God is God. And being God, and you and I being made in his image, he expects us to do the same, to be consistent in who we are. God is not a God of chaos, and he is not a God of uncertainty. God is not ex-lex. He conforms to himself. He couldn't swear by anything else, so he swore by himself when he made the oath. Why? Because God is God. He is the rock-solid anchor point of our life, and you can count on it. Here are the 5 questions for those of you who are part of the School of Biblical Studies. Screenshot that. Got it? Thank you so much for supporting this ministry. Please don't leave us. We need you. So much that we're doing, and we need your financial support. Please stay with us. It's the Lord's Day. It's a special Lord's Day in the sense that all Lord's Days are special. I know that is true, but there's a combination that happens today in this, if you're watching it live, and that is it's Lord's Day and it's also Mother's Day. Don't allow mothers to overshadow Jesus by any stretch. And yet at the same time, it's easy to make the compliment, to see how they come together, isn't it? Thank you if you're a mom. Thank you for what you do to present Jesus in the lives of your children, to lift him up, to make him seen. And today, more than any other day, is an opportunity for you to Show your children what it's like to be intimate with the Lord through communion, common union with the Lord, by being simple and innocent and meaningful in the way that you go about that. Happy Lord's Day. Thank you for being with me. This is Sonny Chow saying, be there. Matthew 16:26.